In the last episode, we get really bad news about our boat being on fire and then sinking. We suffer more emotional trauma as we've been made to be responsible for the cleanup despite being in Australia at the time. But what can we do? In this episode, we bring to you a live update on the aftermath of our burnt wreck, the sheriff's demands, risk of pollution, getting the charred remains out of the water, and our emotional journey. Well, hi folks, it's Dr. Ellie
and
Dr. John back again, and we want to give you an update on what's been happening in our lives since last week's episode, where we let you guys know that our boat had burnt.
We got that video out really quickly because there's several lessons to learn. Clearly, it was a complete shock to us that a fire could spread through a fiberglass boat that fast. So we wanted everybody to be aware of that. And there's also all those personal liability issues that you need to be aware of as a cruising sailor.
And the third thing was that we've got a lot of people that are following our journey and they're interested in our journey and our adventure. And this is all part of it. You know, we're not going to sugarcoat it and say that, oh, it doesn't matter and it's only a little...
It's all bubbles, fairies, and rainbows.
Yeah. This is reality and this is what happens. So, you know, we want to be as real as possible.
Since that video, we are absolutely overwhelmed by all the support from all of you guys. So, look, really a very sincere thanks for all of that, because you saw us...
Wasn't our finest hour, was it?
Sorry
about that, guys.
You saw us at the bottom of our pit, because that was after 2 days of no sleep, and we just wanted to get the video out. We are so grateful for the support, because that was a really tough time, and it didn't stop there, and we'll take you through this week's course of events. So we left you at the cliffhanger. It was 9:30 US time, about midnight Australian time, and I'd been served with an administrative order which said that I had to have a contract in place within 2.5 hours. Now, we've had some comments on YouTube, which were negative ones, about, of course, you should be responsible. We never denied, and we're happy to be responsible, but I think that the practicality of getting a signed contract in place in 2.5 hours with a process that's complicated, and all that's going to happen is the salvors can't assess their risk, so they're going to bump up the price. They're going to cover their backsides and say, well, it might cost me this much, so we'll add on a few zeros. It also means you can't get second quotes, you can't get comparisons, and you can't really get advice. I mean, what I would have thought would be much more appropriate is in 2.5 hours I'll sign a thing saying, yes, I will take full responsibility, but give me a bit more time, for goodness sake. But anyway, that's the law, it's done, and we dealt with it. So the other challenge we had was I then was getting onto my insurance agent repeatedly, emails, phones, texts, no answer. Time is passing. The clock's ticking by. I'm seeing
that 2.5 hours that you had was
going, and there was no response to all of this stuff, and that was creating a huge amount of anxiety for me, because obviously all the threats of the liability, do I sign, risk going against my insurance company. So at that point, it was probably half an hour later, I made the decision that I had to get legal advice. So I went onto Google, looked up maritime lawyers in Fort Lauderdale, and I picked the one that was closest to Dania Beach. No idea what he's like, what he would be like, and phoned up their office, spoke to a receptionist, and very rarely can this happen, but I was very grateful it did. They managed to put me through to a lawyer, to the lawyer, and we had a talk, and I explained the situation, and his advice was, if the insurance company told me not to sign, I cannot sign. If it becomes a federal issue, let it become a federal issue, because the insurance company should subsequently have to pay the costs, even though they are so much higher. At about 11 a.m., so this is about an hour before the deadline, my insurance agent did call me, thank goodness. And we had a discussion because he'd now read all the emails, seeing the administrative order and seeing the original fine threat of $100,000 a day. So he said, yes, you need to get a contract in place. And he had already had a talk with the salvers, but the salvers wouldn't tell him the price they wanted to charge. He said the salvers wanted to talk to me. He agreed that, yes, I would need to sign the contract. And so about 10 or 15 minutes later, I got a call from the salvers, who then had the discussion saying it was the same contract they presented the day before, but it they were handwriting the conditions, saying they were going to limit the expenses to up to $75,000. But in the discussion, they said sometimes they get messed around with insurance companies not paying in a timely manner, so they wanted me to pay the $75,000 upfront and immediately. I questioned this and said, well, is this normal practice? My experience is, sure, pay half up front and the rest at the completion of the contract. They also said, well, it might only cost $50,000. And I said, well, if it's only going to cost $50,000 and I've paid you and you've got $75,000 in your account, are you really going to give me back $25,000? That's just too tempting for a company to keep all the money or bump up their costs. And also, this contract is expected to be signed without a breakdown of how those costs are allocated, which is something you don't normally do. But the clock was ticking. By the time we'd had this discussion, it was about 11:45, 15 minutes to go. I said, okay, well, I don't have $75,000 cash right now in the US, so there was about $30,000 in the account, in my account in the US, I guessed. So I said, well, I'll pay you that up front, but the rest of the money will have to come later, and it'll have to be, moved across borders from Australia. However, I had to agree. I didn't have any choice. If I didn't sign the form under their conditions, then I presume I'd be in default with the administrative order.
That wasn't a ceiling of $100,000 a day.
Oh, that was the fine.
That was the fine.
Plus costs.
So the costs could have blown out.
The Coast Guard had said that if the wreck is in the middle of the Darnia Canal, which is what's blocking the Darnia cut-off canal, the cost of the canal being blocked is like $1 million, or I can't remember which way around. But anyway, that cost was about $1 million a day. If there was pollution, the cost of that cleanup could be about $3 million a day. That's all pretty, obviously, horrendous.
What you were seeing was all that aggravation in the background, which that information we hadn't had the opportunity to share.
Okay, so they present me with this contract, they email it to me, I print it, I sign it, I scan it, I send it back. I got it back to them at about 5 or 10 past 12, and I immediately sent a message to the Coast Guard guy saying, we have a contract, it's in place, I hope you're happy with that. Having said that, the Coast Guard guy was really very friendly and very helpful. Like, I'm very appreciative of his patience in explaining why we had to do what we had to do. So I then obviously called back the insurance company and told them what the contract was. I emailed them a copy. He wasn't happy and he said it's not normal to have to pay out the money up front. At that stage, I was sending them the money anyway. It turned out that I only had $29,000 in my account, so they've cleaned up my bank account in the US to pay the upfront costs. And then I really asked the insurance company to then start negotiating properly with the salvers, because the salvers knew that I was a weak target. I presume this is just a very strategic tactic to undermine me and then get the contract in place so to protect them. So, I understand it's very strategic and very clever.
As John said, at no time were we trying to shirk the responsibility that it was our boat that was causing the problem, and we wanted to fix it up as soon as possible.
Yeah.
But when there's no ceiling on price, that is a whole different ballgame.
And I mean, the other thing is I couldn't even sign anything to pass the authority for somebody in Darnia Beach to sort it out. I couldn't, there was many people that were happy to help us out, and if I could have passed it over to somebody else to say, please negotiate with the salvers, please, sign the forms, obviously it's going to come back to us anyway. But the practicality of me actually trying to talk to these people from Australia in the middle of the night is really
challenging.
hard. Yeah. So one of the things that the insurance company wanted to do was to get a written quote of how the salvors got that price. So that was requested. I must say I've never seen it, and this is now a week later, but it's all been resolved. The next deadline was 8 a.m. the next morning, US time, where they had to have a plan in place. There are very few yards that are able to take waste of that size. The boatyard directly over the canal from where the boat was burned started negotiating. As long as protections were put in place, these guys were willing to take it, given the protection for themselves.
There was a number of issues that had to be addressed before he was comfortable in agreeing to take the wreck out of the water. So one by one they had to be addressed and worked through. So, and the contamination thing, so long as it was completely free risk of contaminating the ground, the water, that kind of thing. So that was a whole other thing. So
the salvors obviously were creating the plan for the removal. So one of their conditions on the contract was, while we'll hope to be able to float it with airbags, if we need to bring in a mobile floating crane, that's going to cost $50,000 a day. The thing we haven't really talked very much about is the Leopard 45 that was in front of us. Now, clearly our boat caught fire first, and then it floated forwards with the wind. It
was windy that day, wasn't it?
Yeah, hit the Leopard 45 in front of us, and then it caught fire, and it's been completely annihilated too.
Can I say that, in some of the comments we got on the YouTube saying, how come nobody tried to rescue the 45 if they saw that the 50 was, on fire? Surely someone could have rescued the 45 and stopped it from burning too. And actually there was attempts at rescuing the 45, but by the time that people got there and tried to board it and get close to it, the flames were so intense and so hot that it was way too dangerous. And there was a few attempts at trying to rescue the 45, just for the record.
Unfortunately, we had no idea the name of the boat or the name of the people or how to get in contact with them. So we had no way of reaching out to them, and we asked several people if they could give us contact details.
After a few days, we still hadn't got contact.
Yeah.
So we tried another person that we thought they might know who they are, and which fortunately enough she did, and she gave us their contact details, because we're really conscious of whatever we're going through. These guys have got to be going through the same thing. So we really wanted to reach out to them, and that's why we didn't mention it in the first video, because we were already on the trail to try and find out who they were.
We did know that their insurance company was much more rapid at approving the salvage, and obviously their boat wasn't burnt as much. Not that it makes any difference, they're both complete write-offs, but it's still totaled, but the hull was still intact. So when that boat could be raised up the water and then floated away, and that was done a day later. So fire was on Wednesday afternoon, they put things in place on Thursday, and they raised their boat on the Friday. Our salvors were negotiating where to take Ultra Dash, and obviously our flotation was a lot more complicated because the hulls had just collapsed in and it didn't have any structural integrity at all.
So people will be wanting to know how the other guys are. So we did manage to reach out to them. We got their contact telephone number, and we agreed that we'd each like to talk to one another to check to see the other person's all right. And we wanted to offer our condolences, even though it wasn't our fault and we didn't have anything to do with it. We still felt like we wanted to do that.
All four of us have gone through very similar kind of feelings. They very quickly used the same strategy as us. When we got the news, the first thing I said, it's only a boat, it's only a boat. Don't be emotional, it's only a boat. We have insurances. You still go through the whole process of bereavement, loss, etc.
Well, there's so many things that you're thinking about at the time. First off, you're thinking about, was anyone hurt? Was anyone on the boat? But unfortunately, what you're getting is a few different versions of the truth.
The information we got was only ever a word of mouth. And the other thing we didn't comment on was the 2 people that were injured. We know nothing about these guys apart from, again, word of mouth and news articles said 2 people had been to hospital. We heard later that the night of the injury that they had both been sent home, so we know they weren't seriously injured.
So we felt much better with that.
Yes.
All we can do is give the information that we know to be fact.
Yeah. Even the news articles the TV news had some errors in them. I mean, one of them said the 2 boats were tied together. Clearly complete rubbish. We don't know what the cause of the fire is still. You know, there are suspicions and there are various postulated theories, but we still don't know.
As far as we can see, we don't think there's anything suspicious about it. We think it was an event that took place or something happened and it wasn't intentional, it wasn't arson, it wasn't malicious. So let's get back to what's happening with the wreck.
The wreck had to come out the water. The other boat, the 45, was floated and driven away. They sent divers down to the wreck, our wreck at the bottom of Downey Canal.
They had to have someone on patrol 24/7 to make sure that it wasn't a hazard.
So that was all part of our $75,000. So they sent a diver down. They thought they might be able to raise it with bags, but they were very unsure. In a couple of days' time, they did raise it, and all you can see is basically the wreck, a few little bits of the boat sticking up out the water and the flotation bags around it. And that they then tied that to the side of the canal, so the canal was clear, while they then established where they could lift it out the water for the fire assessors and the final tidy up and the disposal of the wreck. The boatyard over the canal from where the boat sunk was called Taylor Lane Yacht and Ship, and they were very helpful.
They didn't have to do that, and they could see that we were really stuck, and so they worked really, really hard to sort of make this happen.
If they hadn't agreed to do it, it probably would have cost an extra $50,000 to get the barge crane. So, I mean, it's a huge saving for the insurance company or for us, depending on who pays. So yeah, we appreciate it very much, and all the footage, all the detailed video footage was from the same boatyard. So finally the boat was lifted out the water. It was driven down across the canal with towboats and then lifted out with a crane onto dry land, and this happened on Wednesday, which is almost exactly 1 week after the accident happened. The boat was having to be protected and observed 24/7 at the side of the canal for all of that time. It looks awful. It looks absolutely...
Like, you know, as they're lifting it up out of the water, it's like, you know, it's like the charred remains of something you once loved, you know. It sounds really, you know, dramatic, but it's kind of like really intense seeing it coming out of the water with all its bits of fiberglass, and it kind of, yeah, it's nasty.
Yeah, and as it came up, you kind of also get memories of, oh, there's our fortress anchor. I actually thought the fortress anchor might burn because it's aluminium. And obviously the frames for the $27,000 solar arch, and oh my goodness, all the other little pieces. And it just brought up memories of all the other things inside the boat that were our personal belongings and had emotional attachment for us. You know, we've had hundreds of wonderful comments from thousands of wonderful comments from people, and we really appreciate that. So for us, there was like 2 or 3 people who clearly had bad attitudes and clearly
like almost like wake up to yourself, you know, like considering how much, you know, there is out in the world and what's happening out in the... We know because we're out in the world helping people. We do aid work. We are very well aware of what's happening in the world.
And so, I mean, we never said that we were unique. We're just saying, giving you the story of our experience. And it's not a nice experience. But lots of people go through fires or disasters which wreck their boats, or their cyclones, fires, wreckings, sinkings, you know, and you lose everything. Everybody out there that has gone through that sort of experience will know exactly what we're feeling.
We had one very negative person that came onto the channel.
So there was personal denigration and stuff like that, you know, accusations of inappropriate stuff and lies.
Well, things just don't add up, and like
Yeah,
I find this
hard to believe.
hard
What?
to believe. Excuse me.
You don't believe the pictures?
Like we were kind of gobsmacked.
But we just have to have sympathy for people whose lives are that negative. If that's their perception, if that's the way they accuse other people, it's a reflection of them.
It's a reflection of where they are, and we had to kind of carve that out of, well, let's not let that affect us.
Is there anything else you want to say about that?
Well, I actually did, because this is our field. This is mental health and wellness is our field. And it's really interesting because even though we know this stuff, we know about loss and grief, and we counsel people, and we guide them through this process, it doesn't make you immune to feeling the emotions and having to go through them yourself.
So just to give you an example of reaction, what did you say?
You're going to share it. I want to share it with our closest friends here.
So the morning after the event, Elizabeth said,
I said, I hate boats. I'm never getting another boat again. It's too painful. I don't want to have anything to do with boats. So that was my anger that came up. And in the back of my head, I'm talking to myself saying, you don't really mean that. You don't really mean that. But, of course, that I wanted to say that. I was really angry that this...
We had a very clear plan, which was our long-term dream. It was in place. We were going to do this. We had the flights. We were going to get the boat. We were going to go back out, blah, blah, blah. And that was where we were going, for the next 5 to 10 years. Suddenly, it all goes up in the air, and you're kind of... Okay, so then you've got to make a whole new plan and try and put things back into place. And clearly, there are ways that need to be done. We need a boat. We need to decide what sort of boat. It's a big...
I don't hate boats, by the way. I still love them. I was just cross and angry. Stage 1 of grief.
So guys, please ding the dong, hit the like and subscribe buttons.
Subscribe first, then hit the like, and then ding the dong. Subscribing is really important.
Yeah, and please comment to us, let us know what you think, because those comments also help the channel, and we love to get the feedback. This last week has been, your comments, guys, have really helped us through the dark hours.
Yeah.
It was really, really touching, I must say. That was phenomenal, how people came to us saying how they had been helped through their dark hours by watching our videos, and kept their dream alive. So this is wonderful stuff. Thanks, guys, for all your support, and keep watching. We'll keep you updated. This is real-time stuff right now. We'll go back to finishing off the season.
Well, I don't know if I can bear it. We'll see how that goes.
Of course you will, honey.
But anyway, if you like our journey, we don't know what it's going to look like, but stick with us, because
it'll be interesting one way or the other. Okay, guys, all the best. We'll see you next week. Bye.
If you have liked this episode, hit the like button, subscribe for free, and ding the dong so you don't miss your fix of the next exciting episode. Love and health from the Barefoot Doctors.